The last thing Asher Vance expected that Thursday morning was for his 6-year-old daughter to be late for school because their car battery died again. "Daddy, it smells like burnt toast," little Sienna said, wrinkling her nose from the backseat. "That's just the radiator, sweetheart, again," Asher sighed, slamming the hood shut and wiping grease off his hands with yesterday's takeout napkin. "Okay, plan B, we walk." He hoisted her Spider-Man backpack over his shoulder and took her hand. The streets of Eastbrook were already buzzing morning joggers, honking horns, and the scent of burnt coffee from the corner deli. Sienna skipped beside him, completely unfazed. "Will you still pick me up at 3?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." After dropping her off at the school gates, Asher jogged back the 20 minutes to the rundown auto body shop he worked at and technically now owned. After the previous owner disappeared overnight and left him the keys and a pile of unpaid bills. The sign out front read Illy's Auto Care, barely hanging by a nail. He hadn't had the money to repaint it yet, or fix the ancient hose, or even replace the cracked cement driveway. Still, he showed up every day, worked hard, and offered free car washes on Thursdays to attract customers he hoped might come back for more than just soap and water. By 11, he had washed exactly one car, a '98 Corolla, with a missing side mirror. Then she pulled up. It was a sleek, jet-black Rolls-Royce Ghost. Tinted windows, spotless rims, and polished so clean it mirrored the clouds. It didn't belong in Eastbrook, that was for sure. Asher stood frozen, hose in one hand, rag in the other. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in jeans and a white tank top, sunglasses shielding her eyes. She looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Her hair was tied up in a loose twist, and even in casual clothes, there was something about her elegant but grounded. "Hi," she said, walking up to him, voice smooth but casual. "I heard about your free Thursday washes." He blinked. Yeah, that's right, free wash, no strings." She glanced at the empty lot around them. "Looks like business is booming." He chuckled drily. "You're my second car today. That's double what I had last week by this time." Her lips tilted into a real smile. "Well then, let's make it a good one." He nodded toward the shaded corner. "You can wait over there while I get started. It'll take maybe 20 minutes. "I'll stay here," she said, folding her arms and leaning against the edge of the building. "This place has character." Asher didn't know why that made his chest tighten a little. He got to work, focusing on the car, trying not to watch her out of the corner of his eye. She didn't pull out her phone, didn't scroll, just watched him with curiosity, not judgment. When he finished, water dripping off the bumper, she walked up slowly, ran her finger along the hood. "You're good," she said. "You do this all yourself?" "Yeah, just me." There was a pause. "You always give away work for free." Her tone was light, but there was something behind it. "Only on Thursdays," he grinned, drying his hands on his jeans. "It's a long story." "I've got time." He hesitated. "I was a mechanic here for 6 years, boss left. I took over, business tanked, but I have a daughter, and mouths don't feed themselves. So, I figured, maybe if I gave something for free, someone might come back." She tilted her head. "It's a good idea, costly, but good." He shrugged. "People don't always come back, but I guess I still believe in giving people reasons to." She was quiet for a moment, then extended her hand. "Talia Jensen." "Asher Vance." Their hands met, her grip was confident, warm. "Well, Asher Vance," she said, "I'll be back next Thursday." He blinked. "For another free wash?" "For something." She got in her car and drove off. He stood there for a long moment, staring after her, wondering why his heart was pounding like he'd just run a marathon. Talia didn't know why she'd turned down the chauffeur that morning or why she'd driven herself in the most conspicuous car she owned into a part of the city she hadn't been in since college. She definitely didn't know why she was still thinking about the struggling mechanic with tired eyes and grease on his hands. But there was something about him, something familiar. She pulled into the underground parking of the Jensen Global headquarters, the security guards waving her through. As the sole heir and CEO of a billion-dollar real estate empire, she was used to being watched, followed, whispered about. But out there, in front of that crumbling auto shop, she hadn't been Miss Jensen. She'd just been Talia. And he had no idea who she was. She liked that. The next Thursday, Asher didn't expect her to come back, but she did. This time in a different car, a silver Mercedes. "New ride?" he asked casually. She smiled. "I have a few." He didn't push, he didn't want to. There was a strange comfort in not knowing, and she didn't offer more. She stayed again, watching him work. They talked a little more. She asked about Sienna. He found himself telling her about parent-teacher nights and how Sienna wanted to be a vet. How they made pancakes every Sunday, even if they didn't have much else. "You raise her alone?" she asked softly. Yes, her mom wasn't ready for it. He didn't say more. Talia didn't pry. Instead, she handed him a coffee the next week, then lunch, then a new hose she had lying around. He knew it was brand new, top of the line, and probably cost more than his rent, but she insisted. Over the weeks, she became a part of the shop. And Asher started looking forward to Thursdays like never before. One day, as he rinsed off her windshield, she asked, "Do you ever do more than just washes?" He looked up. "You mean repairs?" She stepped closer. "No, I mean dinner." He froze. "You're asking me out." "I asked if you do dinner. If that's a yes, then yes." His throat went dry. "Haven't dated in a while." "Well, I haven't met someone who makes me laugh over busted hoses in a while. So maybe it's time." He stared at her. "You're serious?" She nodded. "Pick me up Saturday, and don't worry, I'll drive." He couldn't help it. He grinned. That Saturday, she picked him up in a black Porsche, and he was too stunned to ask questions. She wore a dark blue dress, hair down, and when she smiled at him across the table at the rooftop restaurant she'd apparently reserved just for them, he forgot how tired he was, how broke, how small his life had become. "You didn't have to do all this," he murmured, staring at the candlelit skyline. "I wanted to," she said, eyes meeting his. "You deserve to feel important." And for the first time in a long time, he did. He looked at her, really looked, and something in his chest shifted. He was falling. And he didn't know who she really was, not yet. But he would, soon. Asher stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, his jacket catching the breeze as he stared out over the city skyline. The restaurant's delicate lighting cast a soft glow on Talia's profile as she sipped from a crystal glass, her fingers resting lightly on the stem. He'd never been in a place like this, where the silverware weighed more than his rent, and the view looked like it belonged in a travel magazine. "You keep looking like you're waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder and tell you this isn't real," Talia said, her eyes steady on him. He turned back to her, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess I'm trying to figure out why someone like you would want to be here with someone like me." She set her glass down. "You say that like you think I'm better than you. Aren't you?" A flicker passed through her gaze. "No." Asher studied her for a second. "You ever eat at a diner where the menu's laminated and the waitress calls you baby?" "I used to. There was one near my college dorm. The coffee was terrible, but the pancakes were unforgettable." "You went to college around here?" "Yeah," she leaned back in her chair. "Eastbrook University, business and architecture." He blinked. Wait, you studied both. Dual major. I liked building things and figuring out how to make them profitable. Didn't peg you for the number crunching type. Why? Because don't wear glasses and carry a calculator in my purse. He laughed, and it felt like something uncoiled in his chest. No, because you seem like the kind of person who could walk into a room and own it without saying a word. She tilted her head. Some rooms are easier to walk into when people already know your last name. He caught the subtle shift in her tone. You mean Jensen? Her expression didn't flicker. You heard it before. Of course, Jensen Global owns half the city, but I didn't connect the dots. Most people don't, not unless I want them to. He nodded slowly. So why did you want me to? Her answer was quiet. Because I liked the way you looked at me the first time. Like I wasn't a name or a company or a headline. Just a woman with a dirty car and a free 20 minutes. He was quiet for a long beat. Is that really the first time someone didn't know who you were? Close enough. Asher didn't press. She didn't explain further. He glanced at the untouched dessert between them. So what happens now? You eat that chocolate tart before I do, she said, sliding the plate closer to him. He grinned, picked up the fork, and took a bite. This might be the best thing I've ever tasted. That's tragic. You have no idea. They walked to the car after dinner, the streets below humming with life, but up there, it felt like time had slowed. When she opened the passenger door for him, he hesitated. You planning on replacing all the laws of physics tonight? He asked, raising an eyebrow. She leaned against the doorframe. Just thought you deserved the royal treatment for once. He stepped closer, his voice low. This whole night's felt like something out of a movie. Her answer was soft. Maybe it's time your story had a better chapter. The ride home was quiet, but not in a way that felt awkward. Comfortable, easy. When they pulled up outside his apartment building paint peeling, porch light flickering, he glanced up at the second floor, where a soft light glowed behind a curtain. My neighbor watches Sienna for me when I'm out past bedtime, he said, anticipating the question. Talia nodded. You trust them? She's 80, has 5 grandkids, and makes the best grilled cheese in the tri-state area. Yeah, trust her. There was a pause. I want to see her sometime, she said. Asher looked at her. Sienna. She nodded, if that's okay. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. Yeah, I think she'd like you. Talia reached for the gear shift, but didn't start the car. You ever think about doing something else? She asked. He gave a short laugh. All the time, but wanting something doesn't always mean you can afford to chase it. What would it be if you could? He didn't even have to think. Restoring classics, old cars, the ones people gave up on, bringing them back from the brink, not just the engine, but the soul of the thing. She smiled. You talk about cars like they're people. Sometimes they're easier to fix. Talia turned, her expression unreadable. How much would you need to start something like that? A proper restoration garage? He blinked. A lot, tens of thousands, probably more, and even then, no guarantee it'd work. What if there was? He stared at her. What are you saying? She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned over and kissed him soft, unexpected, and entirely disarming. When she pulled back, her voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe you're not the only one who wants to fix something. She pulled away from the curb before he could respond, leaving him standing there in the dark, wondering if he just imagined the whole night. The next Thursday, she didn't come. He waited until dusk, hose coiled, rags folded, every car that passed making his heart jump. But the lot stayed empty. Friday came, still nothing. By Monday, he was pacing the shop, his chest tight with something he didn't want to name. It wasn't until Tuesday afternoon that she showed up. But this time, it wasn't Talia behind the wheel. A tall man in a slate suit stepped out, holding a leather folder and looking completely out of place next to the cracked pavement and rust-stained walls. "You Asher Vance?" "Yeah, who's asking?" The man extended the folder. "Miss Jensen asked me to deliver this." Asher frowned, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the first page and then the second, and then he stopped breathing. It was a lease agreement. A deed. Blueprints. And a bank transfer authorization. She was offering him a garage, a full facility, 3 lifts, equipment, a showroom. She'd even found a location not far from the school. There was a handwritten note clipped to the last page. "I don't give handouts. Consider this an investment in you." He stared at the paper, heart pounding. Every part of him wanted to run after her, ask what the hell she was thinking, demand to know why she'd believe in him like that. But he didn't even know where she lived. He looked up at the suited man. "Where is she?" "She's in a meeting, that's all I can say." Asher's jaw clenched. "Tell her I didn't ask for this." The man gave a polite nod. "She knows, she gave it anyway." Asher watched him drive off, the folder still in his hands, the weight of it heavier than steel. He didn't know what this meant. He didn't know where they stood. But he knew one thing. He couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. Asher stepped into the garage that Friday morning, the folder still clutched in his hand like it might vanish if he let it out of his sight. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since the man in the slate suit had delivered it. The numbers, the plans, the sheer scale of it was more than generous. It was overwhelming. He dropped the folder on the workbench, beside a half-disassembled brake caliper, and stared at it like it might catch flame. He hadn't signed it, not yet. The thing was, he didn't know what he was more scared of, that he'd lose it, or that he'd accept it and owe her something he could never repay. By noon, he was elbow-deep in a radiator flush when Sienna burst through the shop's side door with Mrs. Adler trailing behind her. "I told her you'd be fine with it," the older woman said, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat with a sigh. "But she insisted on asking you herself." Asher set down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. "What's going on?" Sienna's curls bounced as she ran up to him. "There's a school thing on Monday, career day. Can you come?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I thought they only invited people with interesting jobs." She crossed her arms with all the seriousness of someone twice her age. "You fix things, that counts." He crouched to her level, brushing a streak of grease from her cheek. "Okay, I'll be there, but only if you promise not to correct me in front of the class again." "I only corrected you once." "Once was enough." She giggled and ran back to Mrs. Adler, who gave him a knowing look before leading her out. Asher stood slowly, watching them go, then turned back to the folder. He didn't know what kind of man Talia thought he was, one who could just step into something bigger without flinching, but maybe he wanted to be that man. Especially for Sienna. Especially now. He made his decision before he had time to second-guess it. 3 hours later, he stood in the lobby of Jensen Global, the folder tucked under his arm, sweat forming at the back of his neck despite the air conditioning. The receptionist looked up, her eyes flicking over his oil-stained jeans and faded t-shirt. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Talia Jensen." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell her it's Asher Vance. She'll know who I am." The woman hesitated, then tapped something on her keyboard and pressed a button on her headset. A moment later, she nodded. "You can take the elevator to the 32nd floor. Someone will meet you there." Asher stepped into the elevator, heart pounding. The ride up felt like an eternity. Polished chrome walls reflected his uncertain expression back at him as the numbers climbed. When the doors opened, he was met by a woman in a tailored suit who led him down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The view outside stretched across the city, but he barely noticed. She opened a glass door and gestured him inside. Talia stood behind a long desk made of some kind of dark stone, her hair pinned back, a phone to her ear. She glanced up as he entered, her expression unreadable. She ended the call and set the receiver down. "You found me." He stepped forward, holding out the folder. "I didn't come to say thank you." "I didn't expect you to." "I didn't come to return this either." Her brows rose slightly. "I came to ask why." She leaned against the edge of the desk. "You mean why I offered you a garage, or why I didn't tell you who I was sooner?" "Both." "I saw something in you. Something I remember from my father before this place turned him into something else. He used to build things with his hands. Sketch buildings on napkins. He believed in second chances." Asher looked past her at the skyline. "But you didn't know me, not really." "I knew enough. You show up, you care, you work like it still means something." He didn't respond right away. "Then, can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." He studied her face. "Then what do you want?" Her answer came slowly. "I want to believe in something again, something simple, something honest." Asher ran a hand through his hair. "And you think I'm that thing?" "I think you could be." He stepped closer, voice low. "You know what scares me the most? You've got everything. Power, money, you walk into a room and the air changes. And me, I'm just a guy trying to keep his daughter fed." "You think that makes you less?" "I think it makes us different." "Maybe," she said evenly, "but different doesn't always mean incompatible." He let out a breath. "I've been trying to teach my daughter that life doesn't always give you what you want, that sometimes you've got to fight for it. But this feels like a shortcut." "It's not a shortcut. It's a door. You still have to decide whether to walk through it." He looked down at the folder in his hands, then back at her. "I don't want to be a project." "Then don't be." They stood there for a moment, the silence thick with things unsaid. Finally, he placed the folder on her desk. "I'll take the shop, but on one condition." "Name it." "You let me show you who, and without the suits and the skyline." She gave a small nod. "Deal." He turned to leave, then paused. "So, do you still want to meet Sienna?" Her expression softened, more than anything. He nodded once and walked out, his chest lighter than it had been in weeks. That Sunday afternoon, Talia stepped out of a cab in front of Asher's apartment building wearing jeans and sneakers. She carried a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon. Asher was waiting by the door, wiping his hands on a towel. "You bake now." "Don't be ridiculous. I bought them from the bakery down the street, but I figured had to bring an offering." Inside, Sienna was perched on the couch, watching cartoons with a bowl of cereal. She looked up and blinked at Talia. "She brought food," Asher said. Sienna stood and walked over, eyeing the bag. "Hi." "Hi," Talia said, crouching down. "I'm Talia. I've heard a lot about you." "Are you the one who thinks my dad's funny?" Talia glanced at Asher. "Guilty." Sienna considered that for a beat, then nodded. "Okay, you can stay." They spent the afternoon playing board games and eating pastries. Talia didn't ask questions about the peeling wallpaper or the second-hand furniture. She just listened, laughed, shared stories about her own childhood camping trips and science fairs, the time she broke her arm climbing out of a second-story window to rescue a kitten. Sienna was enamored. Later, after Mrs. Adler came by to walk Sienna to the park, Asher and Talia sat on the steps outside the building, the evening sun casting long shadows across the pavement. You're good with her, he said. I like kids, they're honest. She likes you back. That's a relief. He looked over at her. So what now? Now, she said, you build your garage. I'll help where it can, but you run it. Your name on the sign, your hands on the engine. And us. She reached over, took his hand. We figure that out the same way, one part at a time. He squeezed her fingers. I'm not used to this. What, having someone believe in you? No, having someone like you want to. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Get used to it. And for the first time in years, Asher didn't feel like he was standing still. He felt like he was finally moving forward with her. The grand opening of Vance Restoration was just 3 weeks away. The lights had finally been installed. The epoxy floors gleamed like polished steel. 3 fully functional lifts stood like sentinels in the center of the space, and the custom sign white block letters on black steel hung proudly above the wide garage doors. Vance Restoration and Classics. Asher stood in the center of the empty shop, hands on his hips, watching the last of the paint dry against the far wall. He could hardly believe this place was his. The smell of new rubber and fresh lumber filled the air, replacing the old scent of rust and rain that used to cling to his clothes back at Elise. Everything here was earned, bit by bit, with sweat and late nights and a kind of stubborn hope he hadn't let himself feel in years. Talia had been there every step of the way, not as the billionaire with the power to fund it all, but as the woman who showed up in jeans and a ponytail, hauling boxes and arguing over which shade of blue looked best on the waiting room walls. She hadn't tried to take over. She just fit in, seamlessly, without fanfare. It was after sunset when the last delivery finally arrived, vintage signage for the showroom wall, a nod to the golden era of American muscle cars. Asher helped the guy unload the crated panels, then locked up as the truck pulled away. When he turned, Talia was already leaning against her car, arms crossed and a quiet look on her face. You don't say much when you're proud, she said. He joined her, sliding his hands into his jacket pockets. Feels dangerous, like if I admit it out loud, it'll slip away. It won't, she replied. You built this. He glanced at her. You could have opened 10 garages like this without blinking. I didn't want 10. I wanted this one, with you in it. He looked away, jaw tight. I keep waiting for someone to tell me this was a mistake, that I was just a project you got bored of halfway through. She stepped in front of him, her voice low but firm. You think I do things halfway. No, he admitted, but I've been left before. It makes you see shadows where there aren't any. Talia reached for his hand. Then let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that for a moment, the shop glowing behind them, the night air cool and crisp. Then she pulled back and nodded toward the open gate. Come on, I want to show you something. He followed her to her car, and this time he didn't hesitate before getting in. They drove across town, past the neighborhoods he knew and into the hills above Eastbrook, where the street lamps thinned and the houses grew wider, quieter. She pulled into a long drive lined with hedges and parked in front of a sprawling house with wide windows and stone columns. He stared up at the place. Is this yours? It was my father's, she answered, getting out. I've been meaning to go through it, thought maybe you'd come with me. He followed her through the wide front doors into a foyer filled with dust and silence. The house was beautiful, but untouched, as if it had been paused mid-breath. Talia led him to a room off the main hall, an office lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a heavy desk still scattered with papers, sketches, and drafting tools. My dad used to spend hours in here, she said, running her fingers along the edge of the desk. Hated it when I was a kid. I thought he was ignoring us, but he wasn't. He was building things on paper first, then in concrete and steel. Asher picked up a yellowed blueprint, careful not to smudge the pencil lines. this one ever get made? She shook her head. No, he called it the bridge house, said it was too ambitious, too risky. I think he was afraid it wouldn't hold. He looked at her. You're not afraid of that. I've spent most of my life being afraid of the wrong things, she said softly. Losing money, losing control, but lately. She trailed off, then met his eyes. I'm scared of losing people. He set the blueprint down. You haven't lost me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Good. They left the house in silence, but it was a different kind, one filled with understanding instead of uncertainty. The next morning, Asher was back at the shop early, wiping down tools and testing the new tire balancer. Sienna sat on the office floor with a coloring book and a juice box, humming to herself. Talia arrived just after 9, carrying a long box wrapped in craft paper. What's that? Asher asked, nodding toward it. She set it on the counter and opened it. Inside was a polished wood plaque engraved in gold, in honor of Alina Vance, for the love that built more than engines. Asher stared at it, his throat tightening. Where did you get this? I had it made, she said gently. You never talk about her, but I know she mattered. This place should carry her name too. He swallowed hard, then nodded. Thank you. That plaque was the first thing he mounted on the showroom wall. On opening day, the line for Vance Restoration stretched around the corner. People from all over Eastbrook came, some for the free coffee, some for the buzz, some just out of curiosity. But many remembered the man who gave free washes when no one else would, and they wanted to see what had become of him. Asher wore a dark button-down, sleeves rolled, grease already on his hands from helping a guy jumpstart a stalled GTO in the parking lot. He didn't give speeches. He let Talia handle that. She stood on a small platform near the entrance and spoke with simple pride about second chances, about building something real, about community. When she finished, Asher walked up beside her, took the mic, and said only 6 words. Thanks for believing in this place. Then he stepped down and went back to work. Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned and the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the polished floor, Talia found him in the back, wiping down a carburetor. Do you ever stop? She asked. Not when I'm this happy, he said without looking up. She leaned against the workbench. You know, I never really believed the right person could change your life. He finally looked at her. You changed mine. She shook her head. You changed your own. I just stood close enough to watch it happen. He put down the rag and walked over to her. I want you in this, not just in the garage or in my life, but with us. Me and Sienna, all in. Her face didn't soften, it glowed. I already am. A week later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, Asher brought Sienna to the park near their new house, a modest place with a backyard and a view of the hills. Talia met them there, a picnic basket in one hand, a blanket rolled under the other. They sat under a sycamore tree while Sienna chased butterflies. Talia leaned against Asher's side, her head on his shoulder. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous, he teased. I want to invest in more than garages. He raised an eyebrow. I want to build something with you, something lasting, a home, a life. He took her hand, threading his fingers with hers. Then let's start now. And as the sun dipped below the trees and Sienna ran toward them with grass stains on her knees and a wide grin on her face, Asher knew exactly how lucky he was. She hadn't just changed his life. She'd become it. And for the first time in forever, he wasn't just surviving. He was living, fully, and he was doing it with her. The morning sun filtered through the high glass windows of Vance Restoration, throwing golden strips across the newly waxed floor. Asher tightened the last bolt on a 71 Barracuda, then stood and wiped the sweat from his brow. The garage was quiet now, the grand opening buzz behind him, and the rhythm of work had settled into something steady. He'd pulled 12-hour days the past week, but not because he had to, because he wanted to. Every car that rolled in brought a new story, a new challenge, and for the first time, he had the tools, the space, and the trust to meet it head-on. "Looks like she's ready," came Talia's voice from the doorway. He turned to see her in a forest green blouse and slim black pants, holding a paper cup in one hand. She handed it to him as she crossed the room. He took a sip and raised his eyebrows. "You figured out how I take my coffee." "I pay attention." He set the cup down and glanced at the car. Owners picking her up this afternoon, wanted it ready for his daughter's wedding, said it was the car he drove her mom to prom in. "That's beautiful," she said, walking around the vehicle. "You're giving people more than just restored cars, you know, you're giving them back memories." He looked at her, serious now. "And you gave me back mine." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I've been thinking about something." He waited, knowing better than to rush her. "I'm stepping back from Jensen Global." He blinked. "What?" "I'm not leaving completely, but I've promoted someone to manage the day-to-day. I'll still oversee major developments, but..." She looked around the garage. "I want to be here more, not just physically. Fully." "You sure?" he asked. "I've given over a decade to that company. It's time I give something to myself." "And what is that?" he asked, voice quiet. She stepped closer. "This, you, Sienna, whatever we build next." He reached for her hand, pulling her gently toward him. "You're not scared." "I'm terrified," she said, resting her forehead against his. "But I'm more afraid of missing it, missing you, missing the life we've started." They stayed like that for a long moment, the hum of the street outside the only sound. Later that night, Asher stood in the kitchen of their new house, stirring pasta sauce while Sienna sat at the table drawing a picture of the coolest car ever, which from the looks of it had wings and a rocket launcher. "Is that jet engine?" he asked, peering over her shoulder. "No," she said matter-of-factly. "It's a cinnamon roll cannon, for emergencies." He threw his head back and laughed. "Obviously." Talia walked in just then, barefoot, her hair damp from a shower, and slipped onto the bench beside Sienna. "Can I borrow your crayons?" she asked. Sienna looked at her like she'd just asked to borrow the moon. "You draw?" "No, but I'm willing to try." Asher watched them from the stove, something swelling in his chest that wasn't just love, it was peace. Not the kind that came from stillness, but from knowing you were exactly where you were meant to be. After dinner, once Sienna was asleep in her room surrounded by stuffed animals and glitter markers, Asher and Talia sat out on the back porch, a blanket draped over both their legs. The stars were faint through the city haze, but one or two still sparkled overhead. "I want to ask you something," he said. She turned toward him, her face illuminated by the soft porch light. "I know we've done this backward," he said. "I didn't think I'd ever meet someone like you, and I didn't think I'd get to have this again, but I want it. With you, all of it." She didn't interrupt, just waited. "So," he continued, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, "will you marry me?" Her breath caught, and she stared at him in stunned silence. "It's not a big ring," he said quickly, "and I know I should have planned something flashier." She cut him off by pressing her lips to his, full of urgency and certainty. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He laughed against her, the sound raw and full of something too big to name. They didn't need fireworks, the stars were enough. The wedding was small, held in the sun-drenched courtyard of the house they now shared. Sienna was the flower girl, wearing a crown of baby's breath and carrying a basket she'd insisted on decorating herself with stickers and metallic paint. Asher wore a navy suit that Talia had picked out. Talia wore a gown that shimmered like moonlight, simple and elegant, with a long train that Sienna kept trying to step on throughout the ceremony. Only close friends and a few neighbors were invited. No press, no board members, just people who mattered. When Asher saw Talia walking down the aisle, he didn't see a billionaire or a woman from another world. He saw the one person who had seen every broken part of him and never once tried to turn away. He saw his future. Their vows were honest. No grand metaphors, just promises to show up, to fight fair, to make room for laughter, to never forget the weight of second chances. After the ceremony, they danced barefoot on the grass, with Sienna spinning circles around them, her laughter carrying into the night. As the evening faded, Asher and Talia sat on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. "You know," she said, "I used to think love had to be complicated, that it had to be earned through sacrifice or struggle or some impossible standard." "And now," he asked. "Now I know it just has to be chosen, every day, over and over." He kissed her temple. "Then I'll keep choosing you. And I'll keep choosing you." Years passed. The shop grew. They expanded into classic motorcycle restoration. Opened a second location in a neighboring city. Asher trained new mechanics, many of them young kids who reminded him of himself at 18, hungry for a shot, desperate to prove they were worth something. Talia launched a foundation that focused on rebuilding neglected community spaces, using old properties to create affordable housing and after-school programs. She named the first project the Bridge House, after the blueprint her father never built. Sienna grew into a whip-smart teenager who still carried cinnamon rolls in her lunch bag and insisted on helping in the garage after school. She rebuilt her first engine by 14 and painted it metallic purple. Through it all, Asher and Talia stayed rooted in each other. They argued sometimes about where to hang new art or how many hours he spent at the shop, but they always came back. Always chose each other again. One late summer night, they stood in the backyard watching Sienna light sparklers with her friends, laughter echoing as the tiny flames danced in the dark. Talia leaned into Asher, her voice low and content. "I never imagined this kind of life." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "Neither did I, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." She looked up at him, not even for the penthouse and the private jet. He smiled, "Not even for 100 penthouses. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. And you gave me everything I didn't believe I could have." They kissed as fireworks bloomed in the distance, small and brilliant against the night sky. And in a world that had once felt too big and too cold, they had carved out something warm, something rare. Something real. Together, always, forever.